Well, read the transcript, please. The judge specifically asked Julius if he wanted to testify, and he waived his right to do so.
There's an epidemic in America's criminal justice system. The prosecution and conviction of innocent people for crimes they did not commit. Welcome to the American Justice Podcast. Your hosts, Scott Pogensey and C. Derick Miller, come together to bring you the inside scoop on all of the wrongful conviction stories, both new and old. It's not only about the innocent who have been in prison, but also the victims of crimes as well. No one deserves justice more than them. And now, here are your hosts, Scott Pogensey and C. Derick Miller.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the American Justice Podcast,
where we talk shit.
And we talk crime, but we never talk shitty crime. All right.
Oh, man.
Well, see, Derick, today we're going to be talking about a very interesting case. It's a guy named Julius Jones up in Oklahoma.
Tell me more. Like, does he have a car?
Not anymore, because he's in prison. This guy is actually in prison still. So this is going to be one of those episodes where there's not a true exoneration or real evidence that shows that he's, or absolute evidence that shows that he's innocent.
I wrote a song once for an artist, and it was titled, "I'd Rather Go to Prison Than Go to Oklahoma." This guy is suffering through both.
Well, he's in Oklahoma and in prison.
I don't remember how the lyrics went. It's been a couple of years now. I don't even think the song ever got recorded. And it's probably better that way.
I don't know. It sounds pretty interesting.
I'll have to dig through the archives, the C. Derick Miller archives, to see if I can track it down for you.
Yes, and then we'll have somebody record
it. Yeah. I know some guys. That would be pretty interesting.
That would be fun. All right. Well, you may have heard a lot of news stories lately about Julius Jones, a convicted murderer on death row. He insists that he's innocent. His family has supported him for the past 20 years that he's been in prison.
Damn, that's a long time.
Celebrities like Kim Kardashian, Kerry Washington, and Cleveland Browns quarterback Baker Mayfield have spoken out on Julius's behalf, hoping to convince the governor to spare Jones's life. An ABC documentary series, The Last Defense, spotlighted Julius's case in 2018. Since then, there has been widespread media coverage, and over 6 million people have signed a, quote,
that's a lot of people,
JusticeForJulius petition on change.org, asking Governor Stitt to intervene. Julius pleaded his case to Oklahoma's Pardon and Parole Board less than 3 weeks before he was set to be executed. I mean, hey, listeners, would you want to cut it that close?
Nah, that's pretty damn close, man.
Right.
3 weeks.
Well, the board was in favor of a reprieve. In a 3-1 vote on November 1st, 2021, they recommended that Jones's sentence be commuted to life in prison with the possibility of parole.
Well, that was sweet of them.
Right. Actually, they voted the same way in September, so that's twice that the parole board supported the same conclusion, acknowledging the serious errors that resulted in the conviction and death sentence of Julius Jones.
Okay, well, if they're admitting there were serious errors, then why haven't they retrialed this? Why are they even jacking around with parole? Why is he not in a courtroom? And they're seeing if they can overturn this thing. I mean, the guy's already been in prison, 20 years? I mean, it's definitely time to take another look.
Well, this is actually just the Pardon and Parole Board, so this doesn't have anything to do with, like, the judge that would, actually make the decision. The Parole Board just gives a recommendation.
Yeah, but they all talk. They all have each other's phone number. They all send each other, like, dirty gifts and, email, and they throw in their $5 to the Walking Dead pot every week to see which characters are going to die.
That sounds fun.
It actually is. It's great.
Oh, okay. Well, you may have also heard that on November 18th, 2021, just hours before Julius Jones was to be executed, Governor Stitt came to the decision that he would commute Jones's sentence to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Julius's family and supporters had a lot to celebrate that day. Of course, sparing his life was the immediate goal, but Life in prison, was that the best result for everybody involved?
It depends on the prison, because we know he's in prison in Oklahoma, and, you know, like I said, there's already been songs written about that.
Now, question, was Governor Stitt's decision a fair one?
No, because I do not like his last name.
Stitt. S-T-I-T-T.
No one so far, except for Julius himself. Julius himself has a very normal sounding last name.
Well, the biggest question is, was justice served? And if you ask Julius's mother, Madeline Davis Jones, she would ask for a fair retrial. If you ask his attorney, Amanda Bass, she'll tell you that while she was grateful that Julius's life had been spared, she had hoped that the governor would have allowed for the possibility of parole, quote, in light of overwhelming evidence of Julius's innocence.
It's not that overwhelming, though. If it was really all that overwhelming, then in one of those dirty little emails that they all send to each other, somebody would have brought this up.
Well, the thing is, to be fully informed, you have to also ask Paul Howell's family about the evidence as they know it. So let's get into it.
Let me guess. Paul Howell is the victim.
He is the victim, as we're about to discuss.
Mm-hmm. Context clues.
There you go. On July 28th, 1999, around 9:30 p.m., Paul Howell, father of two, was fatally shot in his car as he drove into his parents' driveway in Edmond, Oklahoma. His daughters and sister were with him.
That's horrible.
Yeah, upon exiting the car, his sister heard a gunshot and began rushing the girls into the house. She glanced back and saw the shooter, who she described as a black man in jeans, a white t-shirt, and a black cap with a red bandana over his face. A second gunshot was aimed at her and the girls as they rushed into the house. Sadly, Paul passed away at 1:45 the next morning. I can't imagine the terror Paul's family must have gone through, followed by the tragic loss of a dear family member. Those poor little girls. It's so lucky that they were not hurt.
Yeah, I can't imagine what it would be like to be a child and witness something so traumatic and just have that pretty much regulate who you are for the rest of your life. I mean, that's horrible.
Right. And obviously here at the American Justice Podcast, our condolences go out to all. It is our mission to not only seek truth and justice in cases that are unanswered, but to celebrate justice when it is finally realized. In the spirit of fairness, let's continue with the timeline, Julius's side of the story, and the quote facts as he, his family, and his supporters might interpret them.
Well, that's very sweet of you, Scott.
Well, you know, I like to be sweet.
I know. And that's you sit on your side of the table and I sit on mine. You know, I'm going to be an asshole and I'm going to say some things about it, I'm sure, before this episode is over.
So we're like the devil and the angel sitting on each other's
Good
shoulders.
cop, bad cop.
I like it. And on July 31st, 19-year-old Julius was arrested for Paul Howell's murder.
Now, I'm sure you're going to let us know at some point in this episode, but what clued them in to look inside of Julius Jones's house?
We'll get there.
Okay. Remember, you promised.
I did. Julius's co-defendant, Christopher Jordan, was sentenced to 30 years in prison after pleading guilty to first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit a robbery. Julius was convicted and sentenced to death, partly because Jordan testified against him. I guess the word of a felon sometimes does carry some weight.
Sometimes it do.
Does that give you a little hint how they knew to look in his closet?
Right.
Ah.
Yeah. But, you know, if you want to take it back to season 2 of the American Justice Podcast, most of the witnesses in that case were convicted felons who had a rather lengthy misdemeanor career underneath their belt.
Right.
So,
or some arrests. But
yeah. Some arrests. If I could go back in time and treat that one differently, I totally would.
Now, you may think the story is over. The media coverage has died down after all. You might think an innocent man's life has been saved, but now he has to spend the rest of his life in prison.
In Oklahoma.
You're trying to decide if that's fair. You may think that a guilty man's life was saved, and his life sentence fits the crime. Are you deciding if that's fair? I will warn you that there are definitely two sides to every story. And this one is no different.
Two sides to every story, just like there are two sides to every podcast table.
That's right. Well, there's actually 4 sides to this.
Why you gotta get all technical and shit?
All right, let's look at one perspective.
Why you gotta bring up geometry, Scott?
Because
geometry?
I'm smart like that.
I failed geometry 3 times.
Ooh,
I'm not gonna lie.
nice.
No, not nice.
I mean,
actually, I failed it twice and passed it the third time.
Oh,
Third
okay.
time's a charm.
I was going to say geometry was not what gave me a problem. For me, it was like trigonometry.
I think it had everything to do with the instructor, the teacher.
Ah, yes.
Because I completely aced it the third time, and it had absolutely nothing to do with the fact that I'd probably memorized it from the previous 2.
You know, this brings up a funny story. My geometry teacher was a guy named Mr. Kripke, Kreipe.
He's not going to be in one of our upcoming episodes.
No, he's dead now.
Every one of these damn episodes has a strange last name.
Well, what's funny is he and I, to this day, like, I don't remember a whole lot about my high school career, but I do remember this conversation because in geometry, there's theorems, right? And there's a thing called one and only one. And I got into a very heated debate with him that saying one is the same thing as saying one and only one. And it wasn't until many, 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 many years later that I finally understood that he was right. And that saying one and saying one and only one are not the same thing.
My geometry teacher was a man by the last name of Jolly.
Nice.
And I guess it was the beginning of the whole Tim Allen home improvement thing. And he resembled Tim Allen in his looks. So I'm sure, I was a teenager, but I'm sure as an adult, this guy got laid more than eggs. He just being looking like that, being a good looking gentleman and having that whole Tim Allen thing to play off of. Like, this guy was super cool, though. I made straight A's in his class. I finally learned the geometry I always needed to learn. But he would do cool shit, like borrow my Guns N' Roses t-shirts to go out on the weekends and stuff like that. Just totally cool teacher. Meant a lot to me as a young, impressionable stoner.
Nice.
Your Stories on Video is the perfect service to preserve all of your memories for generations to come. If you've ever thought to yourself that it's time to get all of those precious memories down on video, now is the time. Here's a quick sample of one of our videos.
My name is Daryl Kaiser, and I was born in 1925 in Canby, Minnesota. The happiest day of my life. It has to be when I got married. Yeah, that would have to be my happiest day. I sat down in a chair that was several chairs, and there was women on the opposite side. And I ordered me a drink, and I looked down that way, and Betty was looking at me. So I winked at her. And the next thing I know, then I went and asked her for a dance, and we danced and several times, and then I asked to take her home. I can't say that I ever gets out of my mind at all.
Daryl hired Your Stories on Video because he wants his grandkids and their grandkids to hear from his own mouth and his own likeness what his life was like. He also shared the family ancestry as only he could. Going back and researching archives are one thing, but watching the person that lived it is so much better. The process to get a video is very simple. Just go to www.yourstoriesonvideo.com and request a consultation. Then one of our experienced story consultants will work with you from the beginning to the end to make sure your video is exactly what you want it to be. Many kinds of individuals and families utilize our service. From the older generation wanting to pass down their wisdom to those that have an unfortunate medical diagnosis. Contact Your Stories on Video today at yourstoriesonvideo.com. Mention the American Justice Podcast and receive a 25% discount.
All right, well, let's look at one perspective. In a nutshell, Julius might contend that the case has been marked by conflicts over the evidence against him, as well as concerns about the reliability of testimony of his co-defendant, Christopher Jordan. The racial bias of some jury members.
No.
Ineffective and inexperienced defense attorneys. Season 2.
No.
Season 2. Prosecutorial misconduct.
No.
Last week's episode.
God.
And junk forensic evidence.
No, Brandon Bobbitt, no.
And alleged prosecutorial misconduct all played a part in placing Julius on death row, where he has spent 23 hours a day in solitary confinement for almost 20 years.
Jeez, man.
I mean, this does seem like a pretty barbaric and extreme punishment, no matter if you're innocence or guilt, doesn't it?
I mean, from my experience of being a corrections officer all those years ago, I am curious as to why they keep him in solitary confinement all this time.
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't believe that you're just automatically, when you're on death row, you're automatically.
No, absolutely not. There's usually entire sections of a correctional facility that is dedicated to people who have large, violent felonies.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll have to figure out why he's on.
I'm curious. Usually when somebody is in solitary confinement like that, it's usually either a very, I guess, popular case. Well, no, that wouldn't have anything to do with it either.
No, I think it has to do more with their behavior in prison.
Right. Well, I mean, sometimes if let's say if the person that is locked up is prior law enforcement, they will place them in solitary for their protection, because there's a possibility that that officer, when he was serving as a law enforcement officer, could have put several of those people behind bars, and they don't want to mix them together. Also, suicide watches and things like that, or gang affiliations.
Right.
They will put those people in solitary confinement. But, I mean, your killers.
Well, they also have a whole section that's protective custody.
Right.
So they'll be in together with everyone else that's in with protective custody. So, I think that when you're the 23 hours a day, that usually has more to do with how they're acting in prison. Like they're getting in fights and they're assaulting the guards and stuff like that. It could be different in Oklahoma. I don't know.
That could be. Man, that was part of my job with Hunt County for quite a while, was classification and actually studying inmates and their behaviors and their criminal histories and determining where inside the facility they should be placed, where they're going to get along with specific people.
Right.
And you're avoiding conflicts. I used to think of it almost like a video game, really.
Oh, wow.
I have like a layout of the facility and labels on every wing, every branch, every pod. And I would look at an incoming criminal and look at his detailed criminal history to determine what type of a person he was and where I could place him in the facility to cause the least conflict. So I'm curious to know why.
Now, Julius's supporters would say that the full facts supporting Julius's innocence were never developed at trial. Eyewitnesses, his parents and siblings, placed Julius at his parents' home at the time of the murder, miles away from the crime scene. Then Attorney General Mike Hunter's office said that
Who?
Mike Hunter.
Don't you dare cut this out.
Damn you.
Don't you dare cut this out.
Oh, man. Anyways, the Attorney General's office said that the alibi was fully investigated and found to be not credible. The AG said that Jones himself was inconsistent regarding his whereabouts the night of the murder. He further said that 2 of Jones's trial attorneys testified to the fact that Julius stated that his family was mistaken and that he was not at home at the time of Howell's murder. Julius's defense attorneys did not present evidence of his alibi during the trial. They said they hired an untrained and unqualified investigator to look into the alibi. Why they chose an inept investigator, we may never know.
That may be all they had.
That's true. But he failed to provide a written or taped notes of his, quote, investigation.
No.
Seems like we had another case where the investigators just didn't write anything down.
Didn't write anything down. Didn't bring
anything.
Didn't bring any tape recorders or video cameras or anything. Like,
it's amazing how many consistencies we see in all of these cases.
Right. It's like, do I really want to carry this stuff to the car today? Nah. We'll be fine. I'll remember it all.
Now we should do a new recording, you can do on your phone now. So it's like
right.
Recording device. It's free and in your pocket.
Yeah, it's totally free and in your pocket.
Well, Christopher Jordan reportedly admitted to the murder to inmates while he was in prison. Emmanuel Littlejohn and Christopher Berry both claimed that Christopher bragged to them about committing the murder, setting Julius up, and making a deal with the prosecutors to avoid the death penalty by blaming Julius. The AG tried to discredit Littlejohn and Berry by saying that they had nothing to lose by testifying, but the defense pointed out that they had nothing to gain. 3 of the AG's witnesses, including Christopher, on the other hand, were given incentives to testify as they did. It is important to note that Jordan denies ever confessing to anyone. He only admits that he was Julius's accomplice. Christopher testified against Julius and is now free. The deal he made was never disclosed at trial. Then there's the issue of the eyewitness account of Megan Toby, Paul's sister. The AG stated that Megan specifically denied that the shooter had braids when giving her testimony. She stated that the shooter had half an inch of hair sticking out from both sides. Christopher matches the eyewitness description based on the length of his hair. Julius's hair had been cut just a few days before the murder, but a photo showing this evidence was never presented to the jury. Several jurors have come forward to say that this evidence might have changed the outcome of the case. Racism tainted Julius's case, violating his constitutional rights to a fair trial. DA Bob Macy, we have an easy name.
Yes, and very white.
Made public statements that Julius deserved to die before charges were even filed against him. He also claimed that the crime was committed to get money to buy drugs.
This
drugs.
Bleeding whiteness all over the place right here.
He needed money to buy drugs.
Them newfangled syringes.
At least one juror harbored racial prejudice that influenced his vote to convict and sentence Julius to death. Now, remember, we're talking about Julius's side here. That's
right.
We're not giving facts. We're just saying that this is what Julius's side is. A juror told the judge that another juror who said the trial was a waste of time and, quote, they should just take the N-word out and shoot him behind the jail. Another juror reportedly referred to Julius using the N-word as well. A police officer allegedly called Julius the N-word during his arrest. The AG's office contests claims of racial bias, and an appellate court decided it was unlikely that the juror would fail to mention one racial slur when she'd reported another. Then we have the contention over the red bandana worn during the commission of the murder. It was found inside the Jones family home with the gun wrapped in it. Several individuals said that Jordan admitted to killing Howell and hiding the gun and bandana in Jones's house. Jordan even spent the night at Julius's home the day after the murder, according to the clemency petition.
But you know how many red bandanas there are out there with guns wrapped in them? I've got one at my house right now. I've got a gun wrapped in a red bandana. That means absolutely nothing.
I think we found the real killer.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm only one state away.
That's right.
Oh, hell, I'm only an hour away if you want to get technical.
Well, the AG's office actually tested the bandana for DNA at the defense's request. They claim the results indicated that the DNA profile matched Julius and excluded Christopher. Julius's defense team said that the results were limited and Christopher's DNA could not be excluded. Furthermore, the results of serology were negative. Since the results don't sound very definitive, maybe they should have been excluded.
No, that doesn't happen, though. That doesn't happen.
Who needs a definitive in a murder trial?
We have a suspect right here, and we're going to build this entire case around him, no matter what the facts are.
All right. Well, what about the old one's past informs one's present argument? The AG claimed that Julius had committed prior violent acts before the murder of Paul Howell. But Julius was nonviolent and had never been charged with a violent crime. The jury was swayed by the, quote, unfounded accusations presented to them and concluded Julius deserved to die.
Okay, but isn't that the job of the defense attorneys to go, no,
right?
He does not have a violent history. Did they do this in court? I'm thinking, no.
Well, I think that that has to do with the legal principles that they can't, if they bring up if they try to say he didn't have a violent crime, then they would have to disclose his whole legal, like his whole rap sheet.
But if he didn't have a violent crime, then
well, yeah, but if you have like
not?
13 drug offenses,
well,
they're still going to not like you.
Sure. I know a lot of people with drug offenses, and not a single one of them has ever committed a murder.
That you know of.
That I know of, sure. And, if it came down to me going to either jail for the rest of my life or being executed or letting a bunch of people in the media and in a jury know that I'm a cokehead, I would much rather them know that I was a cokehead.
Right. The AG claimed that 13 appellate judges and the Supreme Court have reviewed Julius's conviction and sentencing, but all of these courts were prevented from reviewing the full merits of Julius's case. If that's true, justice has not been properly served.
That happens from time to time, or so I've heard.
Well, and this is actually going on in Brandon Woodruff's case because he's never, no judge or no court has ever actually looked at the merits of the case.
Right.
So while the media and celebrity attention has garnered support for Julius by the millions, let's not forget Paul's family, who to this day firmly believes in Julius's guilt. Paul's daughter, Rachel Howell, said in a statement to CNN that Julius, his family, and his defense team, quote, want people to believe that Julius Jones is completely innocent, despite the overwhelming amount of evidence against him, unquote. Of course, having the case be all over the news again has re-victimized Rachel and her family, who were forced to relive the pain of 20 years ago all over again. The celebrities who support Julius have millions of followers. The attention that they have brought to the story has inspired social justice warriors to spread the word as well. Although well-intentioned, the family feels that none of these people have looked at the trial transcripts or have the legal background to come to the conclusion that Julius is innocent. The courts have already heard multiple appeals from Julius and have found no claims that resulted in granting him relief. The Howell family feels that the defense team has turned to media coverage and misinformation as their only hope. People are listening to the loudest, most famous voices and believing what they are told over and over again. Sound familiar at all?
Sounds familiar on a daily basis. In this day and age, social media is a very powerful tool if used properly.
Right. Although Paul's family has a website, Justice for Paul Howell, and a Facebook page to get the word out, these things do not garner as much attention as the celebrity voices out there. But their side deserves to be heard. If you've been paying enough attention, you might notice that I'll be bringing up some points that you heard earlier, laying out the arguments for Julius. We're going to rehash and refute, so let's get into the details. See if you can spot the differences. And if you want to visit their website, justiceforpaulhowell.com, you will find links to trial transcripts, affidavits, letters to the DA, and more to help you be well-informed instead of misinformed.
Now that I can understand 100%, because a lot of these people that would support Julius just because, let's say, Kim Kardashian is supporting him,
right.
They're not reading the transcripts. They're not looking into the facts. They're just seeing that this celebrity, who I don't even know why in the hell she's a celebrity to begin with,
because she had a sex tape.
She had a sex tape and she screws famous people.
Right.
Congratulations. I guess you're a celebrity. But just these people follow her and they listen to every word she says. And I doubt very seriously that she is even bothered to read the facts and the transcripts and everything else. She just saw a cause. She jumped behind it because it would get her more popularity. And then all of her followers get on board because that's what she's doing. I would love to say that that's the way that I got involved in this podcast, is I just jumped on Brandon Woodruff's good side. I did not. I spent months and months reading thousands of documents and deep diving and researching and writing. And that is why I got behind Brandon Woodruff's innocence in season 1 of this podcast. Was work. Lots of deep work. It had nothing to do with a popularity contest. Not at all.
Or somebody just telling you.
Yeah, right. It would have been so easy. On the night I met you,
Mm-hmm.
at the Texas Theater in Oak Cliff, world famous Texas Theater, where Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested. But I came to the premiere of Texas Justice, Brandon Woodruff, and I met you that night. I was there working for a newspaper to write a review for the film. And it wasn't my job to determine his guilt or his innocence at that point. It was my job to review a film.
Right.
And I saw so much in that film that it made me want to dive deeper. And you gave me the data to do that. And I did.
Right.
Forever. What seemed like
and your
forever.
life was changed forever.
Yes. And it totally was. And here I sit today.
That's right.
So, but yes, it would have been so much easier for just me to get behind some kind of famous person and go, yeah, he's innocent.
Yeah,
no,
absolutely.
If the information is there, people, and if you're listening to this, if you're a supporter of Julius's innocence, then at least get the information, the knowledge to back up that feeling of his innocence.
Yeah, at least look at it, and see if you
the transcripts, read the facts.
All right. Well, let's go through what Paul Howell's family refutes about all the stuff we just talked about. Well, remember when I mentioned that Julius Jones had not been involved in any prior violent criminal activity?
Yes, I do.
Well, I hope so. It was just a couple minutes ago. Well, according to the Justice for Paul Howell website, Julius pled guilty to a robbery with a firearm that occurred only 6 days before the murder of Paul Howell.
That doesn't look good.
In this case, he was positively identified by the victim. Julius was involved in another carjacking and attempted kidnapping as well. Why aren't the celebrities and the justice warriors mentioning this when they cry out for Julius's freedom? If they had read the trial transcripts, they would have seen that the state presented evidence that Julius had taken property by force and at gunpoint on at least 3 occasions: armed robbery, carjackings, and assault.
Oh
my.
Yeah, so he does have a violent history, and that's why they didn't go into that.
Yeah, and it's basically the Julius's family is just kind of saying, hey, he didn't have a violent history, and then it's like, wait a second, yeah, he did, but then you have people like Kim Kardashian, promoting, well, no, he didn't.
Well,
and then
from their point of view, from the family's point of view, maybe that's not violence. Maybe that's day-to-day life for them. Could be. Maybe, I mean, you remember in season 2 where we had one of the writer's notes and I talked about the family getting involved in jail culture.
Right.
Where you become, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for here? Numb.
Yeah.
To incarcerations and crime and things like that. He carjacked somebody. He
Uncle
robbed
John's going to prison again.
He carjacked somebody. He robbed somebody, but he didn't kill him.
Right.
So, he's not a violent guy.
Right.
if I pull a gun on you 10 times, but I don't shoot you, am I a violent guy? Yes,
Right.
I am a violent guy because that chance is always there that in one of those 10 times I could shoot you.
You're presenting violence.
Yes, I am presenting violence.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. Well, earlier we mentioned the claim that Christopher Jordan had a secret plea deal with the state and that went undisclosed at trial. It turns out that his release was not decided by the state or the Pardon and Parole Board. He was released as a result of an updated operating procedure which, quote, amended how earned credits were applied to prisoners with split sentences. There exists a signed affidavit with all the details of Jordan's release. In 2012, the state sent a letter to the Pardon and Parole Board objecting to Jordan's parole. They requested that he serve his entire sentence. Both of his attorneys have also signed affidavits saying that there was no secret deal for Jordan's release.
Well, that's just a lie now, isn't it?
Julius and his supporters are fully aware of the details of Jordan's release, yet they continue to spread misinformation. While it is laudable to try to save Julius's life, it is inexcusable to lie while doing it.
Agreed, 100%.
Then there's the issue of the contradicting alibis. The alibis begin with Julius and his family claiming that he was at his parents' house at the time of Paul's murder. No reason for the family to lie about that, right?
You think so?
Well, at first, Julius told his attorneys that his parents were mistaken. That seems pretty clear-cut. 2 uninvolved eyewitnesses can place Julius at a friend's house with Paul's Suburban shortly after the murder.
Okay, so there's still a possibility. They said shortly after the murder, there's still a possibility that, he could have killed him and then went to his friend's house.
Right. Or someone else killed him and picked him up, and you never know.
Play PlayStation,
Right.
whatever you do in Oklahoma.
Well, Julius's girlfriend at the time testified that he told her he was on the south side of Oklahoma City at the time of the murder. Boy, that guy gets around, doesn't
Well, also, maybe he was out doing some things that he shouldn't have been doing, according, when it comes to her.
No.
When it comes to having girlfriends and such, maybe some
Right.
things that you weren't supposed to be doing. So you say certain things to
Right.
certain people.
he? Girlfriends don't always know where you're
Right.
at.
They do now.
They do now. Well, Julius's family said that there was a family friend at their house on the night in question, but the friend testified that she was not. Someone get Julius a shell game gig. He can hide all of his alibis until he reveals the truthful one.
God, man, boy, if this is what your friends are, can you imagine what your enemies are going to say about you?
Right. Now to revisit the infamous red bandana. On Julius's side of things, you can see the results like a glass half full. You can ignore results that point to Julius, do a little yes, but, and say a conclusive argument against him that can't be made. The bottom line is that the major component of the DNA profile was consistent with Julius. The odds are 1 in 110 million of finding another individual with the same DNA profile.
Well, that sells me.
The other thing that I thought about when I first heard about this was, the red bandana thing, there probably was a gang affiliation.
Right.
Which means that they all had these bandanas.
No, true.
And
Seriously.
if Christopher Jordan went over to his house to hide a gun and he'd go, oh, there's a red bandana laying right there on the bed. I'll just wrap it up in that.
Right. But if you're carrying one for gang affiliation, you're going to carry one with you no matter where you go. And unless you're a nasty fucker, you're going to have multiple ones. You're not going to carry the same one with you every day. For all we know, he had a drawer full of red bandanas.
Right, exactly. So that doesn't really bode well for me. But the lack of saliva on the bandana does not exonerate Julius either, as the saliva could have broken down over time or been too diluted for the test to perform properly.
And that happens.
Oh, and there's the pesky problem that Christopher Jordan's DNA was not found. Hey, there's something that Julius's supporters can easily fact check. Have you heard that Julius was an engineering student at the University of Oklahoma?
No, I did not hear that.
That was not a rhetorical question, sir.
We don't talk about such things on the quad playing hacky sack, Scott.
Right. Well, everyone knows that engineering students are notoriously trustworthy and incapable of violence, right?
Absolutely. Every engineer I've ever known.
but the fact that he was not enrolled at U of O at the time of the murder.
Well, that's a thing then, isn't it?
He was placed on academic probation in 1998, and when he tried to re-enroll in 1999, his financial aid application was declined because, quote, he had not met the specific standards of academic performance. I guess the defense had to try to paint him as the studious college boy, but I mean, it was worth a try, wasn't it?
Right. Well, you know how things go down in college. I actually had the pleasure of working with a young lady there for a little while at the end of my employment in the fine art industry. And she and her sister both were graduates of Abilene at the same time that Brandon Woodruff attended there. So
wow.
I just asked her casually without introducing myself or even speaking of the podcast. I said, did you ever have the pleasure of meeting Brandon Woodruff? And here it is all these years later, and her eyes just lit up. She's like, oh, you mean the boy that killed his parents? I gave her daggers, man. I gave her daggers. And
if looks could kill.
I know. And I introduced her to season 1 of the American Justice podcast. And
nice.
She would listen to it on her commute home every afternoon. And within a couple of weeks, she had completely changed her tone of how she thought about the Brandon Woodruff case.
Nice.
Because all anyone knew at that college was what was being spread around.
Right.
They didn't get into the facts or anything like that. So for all of these years, she had known Brandon Woodruff as the boy who killed his parents.
Right.
So I did my good deed.
All right. Good job. Good job. All right. Well, what about Julius's ineffective legal defense claim? If true, that is indeed an egregious assault on his rights as a citizen. I'm sure many guilty people, innocent people, can escape punishment as a result of such an unfortunate circumstance. In this case, the court ruled that Julius, in fact, was supported by counsel that made informed decisions that led to the strategy they chose in his defense. Apparently, blaming the counsel when you don't get the outcome you'd prefer is pretty standard operating procedure in a capital appeal. That doesn't make it true in this or any other case.
Rarely ever.
You remember all the claims of how racism changed the outcome of the case,
Of
right?
course I do.
All right. Well, the arresting officer, the prosecutors, and a juror all played a part. But Julius never mentioned the fact that the arresting officer called him the N-word until the airing of The Last Defense on ABC.
Yeah, I hate to say this, but that sort of thing, I can't do this. I'm a white guy, and I can't officially back this up with paperwork. But I can almost assure you that every black man can almost tell you every single time that a white man has called them the N-word. Now, why this didn't come up in the trial or anything else, it waited until there was the last defense. Yeah, it waited until there was something in the media.
Right.
Like maybe, I doubt very seriously this is something that just popped into his mind after all these years.
Right.
I'm telling you right now, firsthand experience, all the black friends I've had over the years when growing up where I did, when a white person would call them the N-word, there was no delayed reaction, especially as long as this had been delayed. Why in the world was it just brought up for the airing of this show?
Right. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. And the only thing that Julius claimed that the prosecution did that was racist was they used the word prowl when describing the way that he drove around looking for his pretty.
His precious?
Is prowl a racist word?
I don't think so. I think prowl is like, you see something like a cat does, when he's like stalking a bird or whatever, just really slow. I guess that term would be used for someone who's slowly driving around, like if you're a criminal, slowly driving around the neighborhood looking for someone to victimize.
Right.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, I remember they used the word prowler.
Yes.
Like the person that would kind of walk around the neighborhood and look for houses to break into.
Yeah, like peeping toms.
Like that. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
That was a term that my grandmother, both of my grandmothers, used a lot when she would get reports that there was somebody in the neighborhood up to no good. She would say that there is a prowler.
Right, exactly. Now, I have no doubt that there was a racist juror involved in this trial, but the use of a racial slur was never reported, and the juror who brought this to light said that the evidence was so overwhelming that she, quote, still believes to this day that Mr. Jones is guilty of shooting and killing the victim. Now, all right, let's get to the point about the shooter's hair, if you don't mind. Christopher Jordan wore his hair in cornrows. The eyewitness specifically denied that the shooter had braids or cornrows. She said that she could see the hair between the stocking cap and his ear. Julius isn't claiming that he was bald at the time of the murder, is he?
Well, also, I mean, cornrows isn't something that you can just duck in and out of either. It takes a very long time to put that up or take that down.
Right.
So, yeah, there's no way you can go from cornrows to no cornrows at the drop of a hat.
Right. Well, did I mention earlier that Julius claims that he was not given the opportunity to testify by his own defense?
I wasn't aware of that.
Well, read the transcript, please. The judge specifically asked Julius if he wanted to testify, and he waived his right to do so. Hey, Kim Kardashian, did you miss that part of the transcript?
Kim Kardashian did not read the transcript. Kim Kardashian and read are like oxymorons. They're like right up there with military intelligence. It's just two words that do not go in the same sentence together.
Hey, look, we have a quote from Oklahoma Attorney General Michael Hunter.
I believe him already.
The fact is, Julius Jones murdered Paul Howell in cold blood in front of his sister and daughters. No celebrity, imploration, or profusion of misinformation will change that.
I mean, maybe if he had better celebrities.
Right.
Like when we get into the West Memphis Three, I mean, those guys had like Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam and Natalie Maines from the Dixie Chicks and stuff like that.
Johnny Depp, right?
Johnny Depp, yeah. So you got Kim Kardashian, man. I'm sorry. You're like the rock band Foreigner. When all the rock bands from the 80s got around the big hat and like pulled out the titles of all the songs that they were going to record during their career, Foreigner obviously got to choose last. They
got what was left over.
They got whatever was left over. I'm sorry.
That's
I know
funny.
there's got to be a lot of Foreigner fans out there. I'm not one of them. Same thing. It came to the celebrity hat for all these people. This guy drew Kim Kardashian, which in turn also gets him Kanye West, which in my opinion is not much better.
If at all. All right. So listeners, so what do you think? Is an innocent man, though spared from the death penalty, going to waste away in jail? Or has a guilty man's life been spared and his sentence just as good as it's going to get? No cheating by asking Kim Kardashian what she thinks.
There's another one of those oxymorons, Kardashian and think.
That's right. Think for yourself. It's the only way to arrive at true American justice.
I believe so.
Do we have final thoughts?
My final thought is to everyone out there, do not follow the celebrities in this case, the celebrity opinions in this case, the social media opinions in this case. Don't go to TikTok looking for this man's guilt or innocence. The information is available on the Howell website.
Right.
Go there, download all that information, and take some time. Read it all yourself, and then come to your conclusion. Because if you're going to ride into this case on the coattails of celebrities, you are riding in the wrong direction.
Right. And that website, again, just for you guys to do your own research, is justiceforpaulhowell.com. And yeah, I think that this is one of those cases where, you know, the celebrities just kind of get told something.
Right.
But, also there's two sides of it, because you would think that if ABC, a news program, in 2020 or whatever, or I don't think it was 2020, but ABC did a special multi-part series about this guy and calling serious doubts into his guilt, you would think they would have done the research.
No,
and
absolutely.
so it's kind of hard to tell, like, if it's, You know what I mean? Like, did they do the research and they still came to the conclusion that he was innocent, or because I did watch The Last Defense and it definitely slants towards him not doing it.
Well, it's like also the American Justice Podcast has been accused recently by voicemail of supporting the innocence of some people who don't deserve it. Mr. Dan from Fargo, North Dakota. Yeah. And, we came to these conclusions by doing the work, by doing the research. I'm sure we could Google these people and just kind of go with the flow of what social media and celebrity are saying about them. But we have gone and we have done the research, and we have read document after document. And this is the conclusion that we've came up with. So we took the hard way, and we're going to continue to take the hard way. But, there's some people out there that prefer easy, and, more power to you if that's what you want to do.
Well, again, and we just encourage everyone, don't take our word for it. Don't take Kim Kardashian's word for it. Don't go do the research yourself and look at the trial transcript, look at the information that the Paul Howell's family is giving. And, but yeah, that it's an interesting case for sure.
Yeah, it's all out there and it's all available. Do it.
All right, guys. Well, until next time, remember to stay aware,
stay strong,
and get involved. We'll see you next time.
The American Justice Podcast is owned and copyrighted by Atua Productions, LLC of Dallas, Texas. Your hosts are Scott Pogensey and C. Derick Miller. Atua Productions aims for this to be an interactive podcast where you, the audience, has a great amount of influence on the content of our shows. You can interact with us in several ways. First, and most preferred, is you can leave us a voicemail. Our phone number is 972-942-0444. Be sure to leave your name and city you're calling from, along with whether or not we can use your voice on the air. If Facebook is more your style, you can log on to our Facebook page at facebook.com/American Justice Podcast. Feel free to leave a comment, or you can message us on Messenger if you have a more pressing question or issue. If you'd like to blog about the show, you can log on to AmericanJusticePodcast.com and let us know what you think there. If you're a tweeter, you can also voice your opinion on Twitter @AJusticePodcast. We would very much appreciate it if you could give us a 5-star review on all the podcast streaming platforms.